we've got our filling, we've got our sauteed bacon and sauteed leeks, we've got our cheese, and we've got our crust. I want to talk about a few things regarding crust and pan. So this particular pie crust is in a glass pan, a clear one here. I generally recommend that you don't bake with these glass pans because they don't heat very well, but this is what we've got, so this is what we're going to use. You can also use other kinds of pans. You can use a metal pan, use a ceramic pan. If you're making a really big quiche, like a cafe style quiche, like I'm sure you've seen the really big fat quiches that are like a cake, it's because they make them in either a springform pan, can't say that 3 times fast, a springform pan, or a regular cake pan, and all of those work, but we're gonna use a cake pan today, or sorry, we're gonna use a pie pan today. There's a few things you need to know about cooking your quiche. So we're gonna bake this at 375 degrees for about an hour, and it depends on your oven. It may take 50 minutes, it may take like an hour and 5 minutes. It totally depends on your oven. You wanna keep an eye on this, and what's gonna happen is the top's gonna brown potentially before the inside cooks. Now you want an internal temperature of about 180 degrees. And if it's fine if it goes a little bit higher, it can go up to about 200 degrees and still have a good texture, but you really don't want to take it out of the oven before it has an internal temperature of 200 degrees. And basically what'll happen is the inside of the quiche will cook much slower than the outside. So you may notice that the outside of your quiche is starting to brown too fast. So if you look in on your quiche at 30 minutes and you notice it's really brown on top, like you need to cover the quiche. And what you would do then is just take a piece of foil about this big, a little bit larger than the pan itself, and set it on top of the quiche. Now, some of you might be concerned about sticking, but the truth is that once that surface is browned, like it's not sticky anymore. There's no liquid in it. It's actually pretty smooth and like you could touch it and nothing sticks. So the foil on top will be just fine once it browns. But if you notice it's starting to get brown early, cover it because there's no coming back from that and you'll have a dark brown quiche at the very end and it's just not as pretty. So when it comes to figuring out when your quiche is done, this is my favorite tool. This is a thermopen. What this is an instant read digital thermometer, and you just put it in the middle of the quiche and it'll tell you within like a second what the internal temperature of your quiche is. Now, any instant read thermometer will work. It doesn't have to be a thermopen. These in particular are kind of expensive, but you can get a cheap one at Target or Walmart for like 10 bucks. They're not that expensive. If you don't have one or you don't want to get one, what I recommend doing is baking your quiche for just 1 hour. Like it's really difficult to tell without a probe thermometer. Like you can wiggle it if you want, but the thing is that once the top starts to cook really well, like the wiggle test kind of fails because the inside might still be raw and still kind of gelatinous. Well, the outside is really hard and wiggling it will not tell you if it's done or not. So at that point, just cook it for an hour because it's good up to 200 degrees. If it starts to brown too quickly, just make sure it's covered with foil and you'll be just fine. The first thing that goes into our crust is our meat and our vegetables. So we've got our sauteed bacon here. We've got our leeks. We're just gonna put them in the middle of our crust. And we're gonna scatter them evenly. You wanna make sure that your leeks don't end up in a clump in the middle. They like to do that. So kind of make sure there's an even coating throughout the entire quiche of both leek and bacon, or whatever vegetable and whatever meat you're using. So you're just gonna kind of scatter it around so it looks nice and even. You can see there is very evenly coating the bottom. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add half the cheese. And we're just gonna, again, just sort of scatter it evenly around. And this particular cheese blend is a blend that I made. It's just some regular like yellow cheddar, kind of a sharp cheddar because I like sharp cheddar, white cheddar, which I like because it has some sort of caramely notes, and then a little bit of Parmesan because I just had some Parmesan kind of hanging out. And you can use whatever cheeses you have like hiding in your kitchen. Like this is a great use for leftover cheeses because like there's no wrong kind of cheese to use. Cheeses don't really mix and match poorly. So if you've got like cheese ends hanging out in your refrigerator, regardless of what they are, this is a really great way to use them up. Now we're gonna pour in our filling. So we've got this big pitcher of filling here. Remember, we do not want to overfill our quiche. We may have a little bit left over, and that's fine. It is way better to have like a little bit of filling left than overfill your quiche and have a disaster. Trust me, I've been there. I will not repeat that mistake. So we're gonna pour this in. You kind of wanna gently pour it in so that it doesn't displace the meat or the cheese or the vegetables. Kind of pour it around. And let's see what we've got here. So I'm gonna stop filling it there because I'm actually gonna pour a little bit more. I'm being very careful about how much filling I'm pouring into this because I don't want it to overflow. That looks good to me. Like I've got one side of my crust here that is a little lower than the others because it shrank a little bit while it was baking. And so I wanna be mindful of that edge because if I were to fill it like If I were to fill it to this side here, which is a little bit higher, this side would be really close, or would be filled really close to the edge, and it would potentially overflow. I'm gonna add the rest of our cheese. We're just gonna kind of scatter it in there. And then what we're gonna do is mix it up a little bit with a fork. I'm gonna take our fork and just kind of like mix it. Because all the vegetables and the bacon are at the bottom. So if you see any clumps of bacon that happen to like have floated up, sometimes they'll do that. Just kind of like break them up a little bit with your fork. Make sure you don't like push around the meat and the vegetables on the bottom too much, because you'll end up with like one piece of quiche that has like all the meat and all the vegetables. And another thing to keep in mind, like this has meat and this has vegetables in it, but you could totally make this without meat. And if you're making it without bacon or without ham or whatever kind of cooked meat, like you would just want to add more vegetables. Like it's great with asparagus, it's great with broccoli, it's great with greens. I mean, pretty much any leftover vegetables that you have in your fridge are perfect for this. Like in a lot of ways, a quiche is like the perfect way to use up excess anything, right? You can use up your excess cheese, use up your excess vegetables, use up your excess eggs. If you're like using egg whites and you have excess egg yolks, you can use them in this. I mean, it's really kind of a perfect catch-all dish for preventing food waste. And it's one of those dishes that will feed your whole family. Like this one quiche will feed a family of 4 and still have leftovers for somebody for lunch the next day. We've got everything all set. We've got our meat and vegetables, we've got our cheese, we've got our filling, we've got our crust in our baking sheet, and we are ready to go. I'm gonna throw this in the oven for about an hour. And one thing I wanna point out is, different parts of your oven heat differently, like some parts of your oven are hotter, some are colder. What I recommend doing is at the halfway point, at the 30-minute mark, set a timer so that it goes off so you know 30 minutes has passed, and then turn the quiche. Because what can often happen, especially with eggs, is that the one half of your quiche will cook faster than the other. And because there's air in these eggs, what you'll notice is it'll be lopsided. So you'll have one half of your quiche in the hotter part of your oven has like sort of this souffle sort of thing going on. And the other half in the cooler part of your oven will be more flat. So that's why halfway through I like to turn it around. So we're gonna throw this in the oven and we're gonna take a peek at it when it's done. Our quiche is done. It started browning too quickly, and so I covered it with foil, and I wanna show you what it looks like. Let's see. Oh my God, it looks beautiful. It's so pretty. Also, I want to mention, and this is what happens when you work too quickly and you have too many things going on at once. This is why you need to focus. I forgot to put these little protective edges on when I put it in the oven. And that is really important. So at 15 minutes in, my production assistant was like, did you protect the edges? And then there was a lot of running around the kitchen as we like scrambled to protect the edges of a really hot quiche. It was not a fun time. So when you're baking this, before you put it in the oven, you want to put these little foil things around the edges again, just like we did when it was par baking, to make sure the edges of your crust don't overbake. So when I take these off, you're going to see they're a little brown. They're fine because we caught it in time. But ideally, these would have gone on when I first put it in the oven, and it wouldn't have been an issue. So let's take these off. Oh my God, it looks beautiful. It's so pretty. Yay. I personally like a quiche that's got a good golden brown topping like this because it's really flavorful. And I don't know if you can notice it, but as I've been standing here talking, it's deflating. It's like when I first pulled it out, it was maybe actually a good inch higher. And now it's very slowly turning inward. That is totally normal. That's a result of the aeration of the eggs when we beat them in the blender. And this is just what happens to a quiche. This is a beautiful quiche. So how do you know when your quiche is done? This is a really good sign. Like the color on top is great. We know it was in for exactly 1 hour, so unless your oven is like smoking crack, there's really no way for it to like not be at temperature. But we're gonna test the internal temperature just to be safe. I've got my handy instant read probe thermometer. We're gonna put it in the middle, and it is at a perfect 190. I am good, I'll admit it. That's awesome. So we've pulled our quiche out of the oven, and we've let it sit for probably half an hour. So at 190 degrees, it should be set, but it's good to let your quiche set for just a few minutes because you want like everything to coagulate and solidify, and you don't want to run the risk of like slicing it and having it kind of like out the side. So we let our quiche sit for about half an hour at room temperature. It's still hot, but we wanted to just give it a chance to cool off a little bit. Also, a hot quiche will burn the holy hell out of your mouth, and that's no fun anyway. So we've got our quiche, and we're gonna give it a try. Let's see how it tastes. Oh my God, that's really good. It's got a perfect custard-like texture. It's got the bacon and the leeks, the crispy top. It's a little sweet from the cream. It's perfectly salted. I think this is the best quiche I've ever eaten. It's freaking delicious. Oh my God, this is so good, dude. You gotta try this.